This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Manchester United 3, Liverpool 2. The Reds' dream over for another year, but the wait for goals ended by Mohamed Salah. I'm Clarke. This is the Debrief live here on the Blood Red channel. Matt Addison alongside me as ever. Well, Matt, first things first, where was that game in the Premier League last week? It was a brilliant match.
It was, yeah. Plenty of positives for the neutral, I think. Obviously, Liverpool have gone out, but they were much, much better tonight. And that is the big thing, really, that I take out of that. I know, obviously, you'd rather go through and you'd rather win a trophy like the FA Cup, but we know it wasn't, a huge priority for them. They've been unlucky this season. They've obviously drawn Aston Villa and then they've drawn Manchester United, which they could have had two easier games, let's put it that way. But, yeah, look, it was a good game to watch and much, much better compared to previous recent matches for Liverpool.
No, certainly that. 5 goals shared in the game. I'll come straight to you on the final one. That was probably the most contentious one. The free kick, the awarding of it, and then Bruno Fernandes, of course, doing what a player of his quality can from that range.
Yeah, first and foremost, I think it's a free kick. I think it's a soft one, but it's one of those that you sort of win very cleverly if you're Edinson Cavani and somebody of his experience has just put his body on the line, drawn the foul, and Fabinho's got drawn. And I think it's probably another of those occasions, isn't it, really, where possibly in the middle of the pitch on the halfway line, it's one of those that probably Fabinho would still do it, but you probably don't notice it. It's only when it's on the edge of the box, like, what was it, against Sheffield United? Was it a penalty earlier this season from a very similar position where he just sort of puts his leg out and makes contact when he didn't really need to try and win that ball. But yeah, look, it was a free kick for me. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And as soon as you see Bruno Fernandes is over the ball, he is undoubtedly a world-class player. I think 28 goals, that is for him now in 12 months, which for a midfielder is unbelievable. I know there's a lot of penalties, there's a lot of free kicks in there, but look, it's one of those things. As soon as you see him standing over the ball, you think there's a good chance it might go in. I think one or two of the goals Addison might be disappointed with. I think there's a chance that on another day he gets a hand to the free kick, for example. But yeah, no, it was a world-class finish.
Defensively, it seemed as though Liverpool were very open tonight. The fullbacks really getting forward. Of course, that did play into Liverpool's hands in an attacking sense. 2 goals after this long wait for goals that has now been ended, albeit not in the Premier League. But it did therefore leave Fabinho, Reece Williams and even Thiago Alcantara quite exposed at times.
Yeah, they were. I think you get that against Manchester United. If you attack, you are obviously going to leave yourself susceptible to those sorts of things. There were occasions where, Rashford and Martial towards the end and one or two others, Greenwood as well, and particularly in the first half, I thought, got a few different chances. Obviously, that's where their goals have come from, apart from the free kick. So I suppose it's easy to sort of go Liverpool were slightly exposed, but, the Rashford goal is one that, on another day, Reece Williams can just clear that, put his foot on it and intercept the ball. So I don't know. It's one of those where Liverpool needed to get themselves going the other way. So I understand the sort of approach, the way they've gone about it. I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's one of those, isn't it? It's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. It's a cup game. It's one that you kind of can afford to go for a little bit more. And you mentioned that the Premier League game was very different to this. Well, I think that was probably why, because both teams know that goal difference doesn't matter if you go out ultimately. One team is one very good team is going to be out of the competition at the end of the match, whether that was in normal time or extra time or whatever. But yeah, it was one of those where you could afford to go for it a little bit more today. I think both teams sort of did that when they had the opportunity. There was sort of periods of the game, wasn't there, maybe 15, 20-minute times where first it was Liverpool, then United, then Liverpool again, who was sort of in the ascendancy. And ultimately it just came down to who took their chances, who was able to pounce on the little individual errors. And unfortunately for Liverpool, that was Manchester United. But as I say, much, much better from the Reds today.
I had a few comments about sort of centre-halves, and of course Reece Williams didn't have the greatest game. I know you watch a lot of academy-level football, and I suppose it just shows the gulf in step-up that it is for a player of his age to make, and whilst learning on the job, he's not a player who's sort of perfected his art, let alone stepping up to that level.
Yeah, there's a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. I mean, we've seen it this season already with young players. We know that all the sort of social media thing that happened with Nico Williams earlier in the season. The one thing you don't want is for people to sort of start doing that sort of thing again, because these performances, even though it's difficult at the time, we've seen it in the past with someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold at Old Trafford, for example. I think 3 or 4 years ago, Marcus Rashford gave him a torrid time, but you learn from that and you get better as a footballer. And I think that's the positive that you've got to take for somebody like Reece Williams today. Yes, he's made an error, and yes, it led to a goal, but look, it's one of those things that you have to be in those situations. You have to get those things wrong in order to improve and get better. I think the reason that Williams was in there rather than Nat Phillips is because he's slightly quicker. And obviously against a team like Manchester United, it's difficult enough to defend against them when you've got a bit of pace. But I think Nat Phillips would have been even more exposed on the day than what Williams was. And we know that Jordan Henderson had a slight injury, so he wasn't available. I think it pretty much sums up why, Henderson, when Matip hasn't been there and when there's not been any other options, when Henderson has been fit, he has played there. And I think the Rashford goal really sort of explained why that was the case, because even though he's not a natural centre-back, I think it's pretty obvious that you've got that extra experience. You just know when to drop off. You're not going to make a silly error like that and not going to drop any concentration. So, yeah, I think we found out a little bit about Reece Williams tonight, but I don't think it's anything that Jurgen Klopp wouldn't have been aware of, and certainly the player as well. It can only be a good thing going forward. So, look, it's just one of those things. He had to play there tonight. I'm pretty sure it'll be Joel Matip back on Thursday for Tottenham. The only reason he didn't play tonight was just to keep himself wrapped up in cotton wool, really. We know how susceptible he is to injuries, and it would have been daft to play him tonight. So, look, it's one of those things. Liverpool knew that going into the game that was the risk. I think the risk long-term has paid off because, as much as people are going to be probably a little bit harsh on Reece Williams tonight, you'd much rather that was the case than Matip plays, gets injured, and then you have to play Williams on Thursday.
Let's move away then from, I suppose, the negativity of Liverpool being knocked out of the FA Cup and talk about the positives, the goals. Roberto Firmino laying on the first one for Mohamed Salah, and both of them great finishes from him.
Yeah, 2 brilliant finishes. We know that Mohamed Salah is capable of those sorts of things. I thought he had 1 or 2 other chances that he just sort of snatched at, but the 2 that he got were fantastic. We know that that's what he brings to the table. I think that's 19 goals for him now this season, which when you consider he's not scored for a few games, that does sort of underline just how good he is for Liverpool. And with half a season or so still to go, you're looking at a really high tally for him again this season. So yeah, it's great to sort of see him back and firing and in form. I think there was bits that frustrated you with Firmino tonight, but again, there was a couple of assists, a couple of flicks and tricks that sort of made you think that he was starting to edge back closer to his best. So yeah, when you add Sadio Mane into that mix and hopefully the confidence of the rest of the team is increased, hopefully by Thursday, someone like Henderson is back. We still don't know the exact extent of his injury at this moment in time, but there was a lot of positivity and not least for me, Mohamed Salah, because we know that you need to score goals to win games, and we know that if Liverpool are going to score goals, the chances are it's probably going to fall to Mohamed Salah to put the ball in the back of the net. So yeah, that was probably the biggest positive, I think, for me tonight was, Mohamed Salah's general performance, but also the 2 finishes as well. I mean, Liverpool created chances. They were able to take them clinically when they did. That's something that we've come to take for granted, really, with Liverpool up until the last 4 or 5 matches. So, yeah, hugely important for that to be the case. And hopefully that now is the start of a little run for Mohamed Salah where he can get a few goals over the next few games.
And Roberto Firmino's come in for a bit of criticism for his finishing in recent games. But I suppose it's one of those today. We saw that first one. That's exactly what he's all about, dropping into that pocket of space, getting his head up, finding the run of Salah, and the ball's in the back of the net.
Yeah, again, a lot like Mohamed Salah, it was much better from Firmino. There was a few bits that you still want him to just do a little bit more. There was a couple of opportunities on the edge of the area where he miscontrolled or did the wrong thing. But look, it was a massive, massive step up from what we've seen of him of late. I think, obviously, we know what he brings to the table at his best. He's been far from his best. And it's, I think, more noticeable with him when he's not scoring, when he's not playing well. I think it's more noticeable and more obvious than most players because he is just so effortless at the best of times. And there was a couple of moments where I thought he looked to have his confidence back tonight, but yeah, not completely there, but certainly some shoots of positivity for Liverpool. I think Mohamed Salah was a huge one, certainly, and Firmino was probably not too far behind him as well.
Right, we've a week, just before we go, we've a week of the transfer window left. Matt, did today sort of highlight that need for a defender if Liverpool are to achieve their objectives this season? We know what the situation is. It doesn't seem as though Liverpool are likely to do it, but is that, again, today just sort of evidence that certainly in the big games, the fine margins, that they are playing a huge gamble here, not going for anyone in the window?
Yeah, look, it's not something new, is it? We knew that was the case. I think what Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool will be hoping and banking on is that one of Henderson or Matip going forward will be fit. It's unusual to not have either of them in a game as big as this. I think you can probably get away with playing someone like Reece Williams in a lesser game, say Brighton in a few weeks' time. I think you could quite easily play him or Phillips in those sorts of games. It's more Tottenham, for example, on Thursday. You'd be a little bit worried if neither of them were fit for that, but as I say, both of them hopefully will be back. Certainly Matip, you'd imagine, will be available for that one. So, yeah, we know the risk. We know that Liverpool are not going to do anything. We know the sort of reasons why that is. Of course, it's a risk. Of course, it's a gamble to take. But I think they have just about got enough. But it's a fine line, isn't it, between getting over the line and getting their objectives done this season without spending and just spending a little bit of money to sort of guarantee it. I think, look, it's one of those things. We know exactly what's going to happen. We don't think that Jurgen Klopp is going to have another centre-back, so it's almost pointless talking about it. But I think there's going to be a lot of questions asked and stuff like that over the next few weeks. But look, they'll be okay, I think, as long as Henderson is fit to play in that centre-back position. I know it's not ideal. I know that Liverpool are now out of the FA Cup, but it's not the end of the world.
No, certainly not. But a big week now coming in the Premier League. Tottenham Hotspur and West Ham, two sides who've been going along quite well in the league in recent weeks.
Yeah, two sides in real good form, and I think it's important for Liverpool that they get points in each of those games. I think Tottenham, we talk about Liverpool now as maybe having to fight to get into the top four, such as is their form over the last sort of month or so. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I think they'll be absolutely fine for that. But yeah, if they can get back to winning ways against Tottenham, obviously that will put them into a great position. It gives them an extra 3 points as well against their rivals. I think it will be a huge boost if they can get Matip back. If Henderson is back to play in that game, you'd really have to fancy them. If they play a similar sort of way to what they played tonight, finish chances as well as Salah did, but you add in the fact that it's Matip rather than a 19-year-old centre-back. If you have Henderson in there in that midfield as well, just to add in alongside Thiago, that would be, a huge thing for them. So, yeah, I think we very quickly get to see a much better Liverpool side as long as those injuries are okay again and they get one or two of these players back. And from that point on, it's all about kicking on, isn't it? If they can get the points against Tottenham, then you have to fancy them against West Ham as well. And suddenly things are looking much, much rosier for Liverpool. So, yeah, we know the situation. We know they're not going to spend this month. We know that if they get players back fit again, they're a really, really good side. And I suppose it's just that worry, isn't it? If there's one or two more injuries, you think Liverpool will really struggle. But as long as they sort of keep going as they are, they'll be absolutely fine this season.
Nice, upbeat and positive way to finish the debrief here on the Blood Red channel. Jurgen Klopp's post-match press conference to follow. And don't forget, the Blood Red podcast will be with you tomorrow afternoon, really picking the bones out of the defeat at Old Trafford that has knocked Liverpool out of the FA Cup for this season, going down 3-2 at Old Trafford. But from myself, Guy Clarke and Matt Addison, that's it from us here on the debrief. Thanks for your time and your company. It's bye for now.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool